a Filipino ticket that ignited unprecedented curiosity in China and sent 5,000 kung fu students to Manila seeking instruction in Filipino martial arts. It begins with spectacle, grows into suspicion, and forces professionals to confront assumptions about tradition, technique, and cultural ownership. Stay alert. Humility often arrives disguised as embarrassment, and learning frequently begins with being wrong. The ticket hatched in a Manila cultural cooperative, partnering with a Chinese travel platform, promising immersive training, cultural exchange, and festival access. A coding oversight briefly created steep discounts, while influencers in martial arts circles amplified the narrative as a rare chance to study an admired fighting tradition directly from source communities. In China, forums erupted. Passionate practitioners, lineage holders, and hobbyists debated authenticity and opportunity. Event promoters framed the offering as respectful immersion, yet beneath the excitement lay confusion. Filipino martial arts include weapons work, ethical precepts, and apprenticeship-based transmission. Many who clicked book expected condensed practical instruction, forgetting that deep skills are earned over years, and that heritage practices are often guarded by strict social norms. In Beijing's training halls, seasoned instructors looked at screenshots and scoffed. Master Li, a respected kung fu elder, called the phenomenon curiosity masquerading as study. He worried about commodification and about students confusing performative drills with disciplined lineage training. Yet even doubters discussed travel logistics, eager to observe different systems and perhaps exchange techniques. For some, learning Filipino blade patterns and empty hand transitions offered complementary insights. For others, the ticket represented a bargain hunt. Government offices logged a spike in visa requests. Private clubs arranged group charters. The momentum turned transactional quickly, bypassing formal channels that usually mediate cross-cultural martial exchange, and raising early alarms among guardians of tradition on both sides. Manila's masters reacted with cautious alarm. Their arts, Eskrima, Arnis, and Kali among them, emerged from specific historical contexts and carry responsibilities tied to legality, safety, and ritual. Senior instructors convened in low-lit gyms and village halls, debating public messaging and practical limits. They feared that sudden inflows of largely unvetted foreign students might strain space, dilute craft ethics, and risk safety incidents if edged weapon training occurred without strict oversight. Some saw potential benefits. Cross-cultural curiosity could lead to apprenticeships and funding. Others insisted on barriers, accreditation, safety protocols, and community involvement. The masters settled on one approach: insist on structured exchange or refuse spectacle. That decision would determine how the story unfolded. The first plane from Guangzhou touched down and disgorged clusters of eager faces, uniforms, and bright banners. Tourist buses funneled arrivals to festival zones where promotional tents promised workshops. Organizers struggled to control expectations. Many visitors assumed access to full-contact blade sessions, while local coordinators offered observation, history, and safe drills only. Tension grew when videos of crowded demonstration floors appeared online clips that favored drama over nuance. Masters watched #spike and felt their discipline being packaged into sound bites. A viral clip of a mislabeled knife workshop prompted outrage. Social media commentators called for protection of cultural traditions. Manila confronted a dilemma: engage and regulate, or shut down access and risk diplomatic fallout. In the early phase, authority figures in China minimized risks. Some provincial officials treated the mass migration as a pop cultural trend, encouraging participation for soft power reasons. Martial arts schools capitalized financially, arranging group tours and branded merchandise. Yet a core of experienced trainers expressed concern. Rapid exposure without ethical framing can breed misunderstanding and dangerous imitation. They pressed Chinese promoters to vet participants, emphasize safety, and coordinate with Manila's recognized schools. Meanwhile, community leaders in Manila demanded formal guarantees, licensed instructors, transparent safety equipment, and explicit prohibitions on live-edged instruction outside accredited contexts. The next days would reveal whether commerce or stewardship would control the narrative. An early confrontation crystallized at a public seminar when a visiting Chinese teacher attempted to stage a live demonstration using sharpened training knives for dramatic footage. Local elders intervened, citing legal liabilities and cultural protocols. The incident escalated online, generating polarized commentary. Some condemned Manila for stifling access. Others applauded guardianship. The festival organizers scrambled, negotiating immediate restrictions and publishing emergency guidelines. They established designated accredited venues for weapon instruction and observation-only zones for general attendees. The compromise calmed some critics, but frustrated thrill-seekers. Tension persisted between short-term spectacle and long-term integrity, with both sides jockeying for moral and narrative authority over what counted as legitimate study. Into this fraught atmosphere stepped an unlikely mediator, a young Filipino researcher named Ana, whose fieldwork documented transmission practices across islands. Ana proposed a pragmatic pathway, structured orientation, safety certification, and conditional apprenticeship opportunities for highly committed foreign students. Her plan emphasized reciprocity. Visitors would support community programs and scholarship funds rather than extract technique for viral clips. She presented data from previous cross-cultural exchanges, showing decreased incidents when formal vetting occurred. Anna's approach appealed to pragmatic masters eager to protect craft while ensuring benefits for local communities. It also irritated promoters who profited from open access. The coming negotiations would test whether ethical frameworks could outpace sensational demand. As the summit of stakeholders convened a mix of Manila's senior masters, municipal cultural officers, travel promoters, and Chinese delegation leaders, debates were robust and emotional. Questions surfaced about intellectual property, legal constraints on weapon training, and cultural ownership. The Chinese lead, a martial arts association director, argued for educational openness and mutual exchange. Manila's elders insisted on apprenticeship models that preserve ritual and safety. Promoters, squeezed financially, argued for staged workshops to recoup costs. The meeting nearly collapsed under competing incentives until Anna presented a model combining rigorous orientation, staggered access to practical instruction, and a community benefit pledge. It was imperfect but viable. The group tentatively agreed to pilot it under strict monitoring. The pilot began with mandatory briefings delivered in multiple languages, covering legal limits, ethical conduct, weapons safety, and cultural history. Participants signed agreements acknowledging restrictions and committing funds to local schools. Accredited halls received protective equipment and liability coverage was arranged. For the first day, attendees observed masters demonstrating non-lethal drills, empty hand applications, and historical context, while senior students participated in controlled, padded weapon practice under direct supervision. Early reports suggested participants tempered expectations. Many expressed surprise at the art's philosophical emphasis on de-escalation and community norms rather than aggressive technique alone. The narrative shifted subtly. Curiosity matured into contextual appreciation for some, and impatience lingered for others. Despite the controlled rollout, incidents occurred. A small group stumbled into an unauthorized alley practice, filming sequences for social media. Local police intervened and enforced fines. Organizers amplified penalties to deter similar breaches. The fallout generated headlines in both countries, some critical of Manila's policing, others praising standards enforcement. Crucially, several Chinese lineage teachers publicly supported Manila's restrictions, urging their students to respect host protocols. That endorsement mattered. It signaled internal self-regulation. When influential voices in the Chinese martial arts community called for patience and respect, many followers listened. The tide of opinion began shifting from spectacle to stewardship, though a minority continued to push boundaries. Meanwhile, rigorous data collection commenced. Anna's research team documented participation patterns, incident rates, and learning outcomes across accredited and non-accredited settings. Early analysis showed that structured apprenticeships yielded deeper conceptual gains and far fewer safety problems than short workshops. Observational metrics recorded increased empathy and cross-cultural understanding among long-term participants. Social media sentiment analysis revealed a declining volume of sensational clips as more participants posted reflective content about ethics, lineage, and shared practices. The data provided empirical grounding for advocates of ethical exchange and undercut arguments that open access was the only equitable approach. Evidence began to shape policy rather than just opinion. The story's authority figures began to shift in tone. Master Li in Beijing, who had initially dismissed the movement as frivolous, published a public essay acknowledging his own blind spots and urging Chinese practitioners to respect host traditions. His essay reached hundreds of thousands, encouraging a wave of more thoughtful engagement. In Manila, elders noted the change with cautious satisfaction. Their priority, preserving protocol and safety, remained central, but they welcomed sincere interest channeled toward apprenticeship and literary exchange. The moment felt like a moral hinge, where prestige and humility met, collaborative practice could begin. Yet the process required patience, and patience proved harder than headlines. One of the documentary's pivotal scenes occurred during a closed-door demonstration where a senior master allowed a carefully vetted group of Chinese students to perform under supervision. The demonstration emphasized restraint, empty hand transitions, disarmament sequences, and the social ethics underpinning the techniques. A Chinese participant, fluent in Tagalog, interrupted to ask about historical contexts where disarmament preserved lives. The master paused, surprised by the depth of inquiry. That exchange became emblematic. Learning stripped of spectacle often reveals shared human concerns about violence, protection, and community. The footage, later released with consent, shifted many viewers' perceptions about what martial learning should prioritize. As weeks passed, several committed Chinese students applied for extended apprenticeships, submitting portfolios and letters of intent. Masters selected a handful, favoring those who demonstrated humility, commitment, and cultural sensitivity. Those apprentices entered multi-year mentorships, learning not only technique but community rituals, maintenance practices, and language. Their immersion included living with host families, contributing to local tasks, and participating in communal ceremonies, practices that grounded technical training in social responsibility. The apprenticeship model rekindled older modes of transmission adapted to modern mobility. For many observers, it represented a repair of earlier missteps, where initial rushes concentrated on consumption, deeper pathways renewed custodial relations. Politically and institutionally, the episode prompted policy evolution. Manila's Cultural Office formalized accreditation standards and instituted a registry of licensed foreign learners subject to probationary periods. Chinese martial arts associations adopted reciprocal ethics codes, requiring outbound participants to complete host country orientation modules. Travel platforms updated promotional guidelines to avoid misleading claims and to emphasize accredited programs. Insurance products tailored to cultural immersion activities emerged, covering supervised practices. These policy adaptations reflected a hard-earned consensus that curiosity must be governed by shared protocols when it involves potentially hazardous traditions and sacred knowledge. Yet the story retained conflicts. A faction of digital native practitioners decried restrictions as gatekeeping that favored established masters and excluded grassroots innovators. They argued that democratizing knowledge through short workshops could expand appreciation and reduce elitism. Masters countered that democratization without context often fosters imitation and harm. The debate exposed tensions between access and care. Some middle ground initiatives explored hybrid formats. Short observational tours linked to scholarship pledges, allowing enthusiastic novices to sponsor apprenticeships. These experiments attempted to combine broad access with durable benefits, generating mixed results, but opening alternative pathways beyond binary choices. Crucially, the narrative's reversal arrived not through spectacle, but through measurable outcomes. Accident rates dropped in accredited sites. Qualitative interviews with host families demonstrated improved trust. Revenue flowed into community-run schools rather than solely into promoters' pockets. The empirical turn convinced previously skeptical stakeholders that structured exchanges produced both safety and sustainable economic impact. When community leaders published transparent accounts showing how funds supported apprentices and facility upgrades, public trust increased. The story's arc moved from chaotic influx to managed cooperation, illustrating how data-informed governance can translate moral commitments into operational practices that preserve heritage while permitting sincere learning. The episode also catalyzed shifts in pedagogy. Masters began incorporating explicit modules on ethics, media responsibility, and cross-cultural sensitivity into teaching curricula. Chinese instructors reciprocated by adding Filipino martial arts history into their club's study plans. Joint seminars emphasized practical de-escalation and conflict avoidance over combative bravado. Training manuals revised to include consent, protocols for filming and publication. Over time, a new generation of practitioners emerged who understood martial arts as civic practice rather than spectacle. That mindset change, subtle but powerful, mattered for how future exchanges might unfold without repeating past errors. On the diplomatic front, cultural attachés from both countries hosted a bilateral forum celebrating the adjusted frameworks and memorializing lessons learned. They praised grassroots mediators like Anna and acknowledged failures in early messaging. Formal agreements encouraged academic exchanges, joint research on safety protocols, and funding for apprenticeships. The forum's public statement emphasized reciprocity, safety, and benefit sharing, and called for continued transparency in promotional practices. The diplomatic resolution turned a contentious episode into a platform for institutional learning, signaling that states can transform viral shocks into structured cooperation when civil society and cultural custodians lead with evidence and ethics. The human side of the story produced poignant scenes: families hosting foreign apprentices, students translating oral histories, elders teaching ritualized respects before practice. A Chinese apprentice named Jun wrote in a public diary about losing combative bravado and finding a renewed sense of responsibility. He described cleaning mats, repairing gear, and participating in local ceremonies as essential lessons. A Manila elder observed Jun's sincerity and remarked that transmission requires humility insofar as technique cannot exist without belonging. These micro-stories filled spaces between policy reforms and media narratives, reminding audiences that lived practice transforms institutions only when ordinary people enact commitments daily. Notwithstanding progress, critics warned against complacency. They tracked residual commercialization, Unaccredited pop-up seminars still appeared on fringe corners of social media, and some foreign students attempted to bypass protocols for quick credentialing. Enforcement efforts, including fines and public shaming, reduced repeat offences but did not eliminate them. Regulatory bodies acknowledged that continuous vigilance and community oversight were necessary. Social norms, reinforced by accredited institutions and respected elders, remained the strongest deterrent. The episode showed governance as ongoing practice rather than a fixed achievement, requiring constant negotiation among stakeholders invested in preserving living traditions. In the months after the initial surge, a network of accredited schools published open-access materials about history, ethics, and safe practice, aimed at reducing misinformation. These resources, co-authored by Manila elders and sympathetic Chinese scholars, became foundational for pre-departure orientations offered by travel platforms. Travel agencies that had earlier promoted sensational experiences pivoted to endorse accredited programs exclusively, using transparent labeling to help consumers make safe choices. Over time, market incentives aligned with stewardship. Consumers seeking legitimate learning experiences preferred vetted programs and community-backed certifications over viral bargains. Economically, the recalibrated approach benefited local communities more equitably. Where earlier mass tourism funneled profits to intermediaries, the new model routed funds into apprenticeship stipends, facility upgrades, and heritage conservation. Small businesses supplying mats, protective gear, and food experienced sustained patronage from long-term students rather than one-off visitors. That shift created resilience in neighborhoods where traditional practice mattered for cultural identity and livelihood. Observers noted that when financial flows matched community priorities, stakeholders invested more in governance and safety, a virtuous loop linking ethical exchange to economic sustainability. Educational institutions seized the moment. Universities in both countries initiated joint research into embodied knowledge transmission and community-based guardianship. Ethnographers documented apprenticeship modalities, while engineers tested protective equipment adapted to traditional techniques. The collaborative research produced publications and practical toolkits that disseminated best practices globally. The international academic response helped normalize apprenticeship pathways and created recognized benchmarks for ethical cross-cultural martial exchange. Academia functioned as an impartial arbiter, translating lessons into accessible guidance for practitioners, promoters, and policymakers alike. Perhaps the most symbolic gesture of reconciliation occurred when a public ceremony invited selected foreign apprentices to present joint certificates alongside Manila masters. The ceremony balanced tradition and modern recognition. No dramatic conversions or theatrical statements, only measured acknowledgements of mutual commitment. The masters read out ethical pledges. Apprentices recited commitments to respect and maintenance. Cameras recorded the moment, but organizers limited distribution to prevent commodification. Rather than viral spectacle, the ceremony emphasized quiet accountability and ongoing mentorship. The image of shared certification signified a restored trust between custodians and learners, mediated by standards and mutual humility. Months later, Master Lee's initial essay was anthologized in training curricula as a cautionary note on humility. Promoters updated platforms to display accreditation badges and mandatory orientation links. Anna's research team published a comprehensive report documenting lower incident rates and greater cultural appreciation among apprenticeship participants. The report included policy recommendations, mandatory pre-arrival training modules, on-site accreditation checks, and community benefit agreements. Its findings influenced international guidelines on cultural immersion programs, demonstrating how data, ethics, and local leadership can transform viral disruptions into structured opportunities for respectful exchange. The long arc of this story reveals a simple truth. Viral curiosity can catalyze meaningful exchange when governance, community, custodianship, and empirical evidence converge. The influx of 5,000 Chinese Kung Fu students tested fragile boundaries, but also created openings for durable partnerships rooted in respect and reciprocity. Manila's elders did not merely resist or capitulate. They negotiated frameworks that preserved ritual integrity while allowing sincere learners access through structured pathways. When institutions listened, reforms followed. When learners humbled themselves, apprenticeship returned. And when promoters adjusted incentives, community benefits stabilized. Practical wisdom, not spectacle, became the durable outcome. In quieter reflections, participants described transformations both technical and moral. Some Chinese students returned home with refined technique and a deeper appreciation of non-combative principles. Others continued apprenticeship for years. Manila communities gained resources and renewed global visibility on their terms. The exchange fostered mutual learning rather than extraction, illustrating how cultural forms adapt without losing core meanings when custodians lead exchanges. The documentary's final scenes linger on simple practices: elders repairing gear, apprentices sweeping mats, translators teaching ritual greetings. These everyday acts uphold traditions more reliably than hashtags and sensational clips ever could. The last image is humble and decisive. A dim dojo lit by lanterns, where a master ties a student's sash and instructs on restraint before technique, reminding everyone that control begins with character. Manila's masters, Chinese practitioners, and civic leaders stood together afterward, issuing a shared statement committing to ethical exchange, transparent promotion, and sustained apprenticeship. No triumphant fanfare, only a quiet pledge to protect living heritage. If there is one takeaway from this documentary arc, let it be this: curiosity must be matched by consent, skill by humility, and access by care. When those principles bind practice, culture survives, and learning deepens in ways that headlines rarely capture.